Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next panel's discussion of the day. So what we've got now is the DJ and Producer Launchpad presented by Music Leads. So just going to explain a little bit about what we're trying to do today. This panel's really for a sort of aspiring and emerging artists, producers and DJs, and we've got a range of industry experts and professionals to sort of hopefully give you different perspectives on the best way to go about kind of getting to where you want to be within the music industry, shall we say. We want to make this as relevant as possible, so I hope any questions throughout, do please let us know. We'll try and get some feedback from yourselves. First of all, I'm going to go through the panel in a minute to introduce everyone so you know who will be talking and what background they're coming from. But a little bit about myself first. My name is Sam Nichols or Whiskers. Perfectly don't mind which one you want to call me. It's quite interchangeable. My background is I used to run a record label 15 years ago. I was also a performing artist in a rock and roll band. But more sort of the reason for doing this is for the last 10 years I've curated and programmed the industry talks as part of Live at Leeds Festival, which happens at the start of May, where we have various radio DJs, PR, record labels, management, etc. Come to talk about that. And for the last couple of years, I've been trying to get as much information and support for the industry, for the music community, for organisations in Leeds. So whether that's supporting things like Equaliser, who you were just hearing about, or Clothcat, or various other organisations, or whether it's helping new businesses or young and aspiring artists as well. So that's what Music Leads is about, and I'll sort of, when we wrap up, I can talk about a few more opportunities that we're doing with that. So now I'd like to go along my panel and introduce everyone. Patrick?
Hi, my name's Patrick Hanrahan. I run a independent management company called Left Blank, managing 4 or 5 artists. Developing those. I also do some A&R and consultancy. I run a record label called Ghostly International in the UK, which is a US label, and I run it here. My background, I've worked in music for 10 years or so. I worked at publishers, I worked at major labels, mainly in sync and licensing and as a music supervisor. And then quit to start my management company, do various kind of A&R consultancy roles. And yeah, that's me.
Yes, Lenny?
Cool. I'm Lenny Bedford. I started out in the music industry like 4 or 5 years ago, working for a independent record label down in Sheffield. And through working at a record label and kind of the entire team experiencing the music industry, we saw a lot of faults and a lot of things about how things could be run a little bit better. So we started developing a platform called Kicker. And the idea was that we would empower DIY artists. So we would do free distribution to online stores, so iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. I think there's over 850, and including ones in India that you've never heard of, and just all those kind of stuff. We also do free publishing, so the collection of royalties. So anytime you play a gig, anytime you get played on radio, we will collect royalties for you. We also have a big database of videos on there that we've shot with the PRS, with the PPL, with BBC, just to try and give insights into the industry and to try and get the knowledge that maybe labels have, that managers have, that publishers normally have, and kind of keep to themselves and use to try and give that information to the artists themselves to, I guess, put DIY artists on a level playing field with artists that are on labels. I'm their head of content, so I create things, and I used to be A&R at a record label, so I've got, I guess, both the creational side of the music industry and also the, I guess, record label side.
Thanks. Sarah? No, that looks like it's working. Johnny?
That one? Is it long enough? Yeah. So hey, I'm Sarah. I work at Grade Management, which is a management agency based in Bristol. We've got about 15 artists from different genres in dance music and reach as well. And the team is composed of all people that come from all sorts of all sides of the industry. So we've got ex-promoters, ex-mixed mag music editor, BBC Radio 1 thing. So it was just quite of a 360-degree management team. Before that, I was in a dubstep label. So that's where I started in the music industry about 9 years ago. And yeah.
Thanks. James? I think the other one should work now, if you want to try it.
Check 1, 2.
Oh, cool.
There we go, we did a duet. I'm James Bevin. I'm the digital director at Rising Digital. We are a digital marketing agency set up in about 2009, I think it was. We've worked with everyone from Swedish House Mafia, Deadmau5, Calvin Harris, Tiga, through to more recently we've we work with bands. We look after Alan Fitzpatrick, Andy C, the Black Madonna, all kinds of people really. When we first started, looked after a lot of artists that were more emerging, as well as the massive artists that we ended up and were lucky enough to be involved with. So we kind of have experience of both sides of the kind of career path of an artist, I guess, and kind of everything that's involved with marketing them. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And just before we jump into some more discussion, I'd like to know a bit more about you. So I'm going to ask a few questions and cheesy hands in the air. And a few of these you might apply to more than one of these. So how many people here are active DJs? So we've got a few active DJs. Who here is making their own original music and producing that? Quite a few of that. And who here is not doing that themselves but supporting somebody else? So as a manager or a label. A few of those. So a really good range of everything. So that's really, really good to know who we're talking to. So Patrick, let's come to you first, if that's all right. Okay. So you described that you have your own management company, yeah, but you also consult and help run Ghostly in the UK. So what are the different ways in which you work with artists for management and with the label?
Yeah, I mean it can vary. I mean, obviously as a manager, I have a roster whereby some of the artists, I've found from inception, from a track on SoundCloud or whatever, and we've built a career off the back of that. Certain artists have come to me; they've already been relatively established, and I've started working with them when they've either changed manager or needed a manager. And then obviously in the A&R role for Ghostly, it's more like, I think, running Ghostly, I don't know, sometimes people think A&R is literally just about signing people. I mean, I don't really sign people at Ghostly. What I do is just help them put together their release schedule and ideas for how their artists should work in the UK. So, I'm not really involved in, we should sign this artist or whatever. They're normally existing artists, and, I've only been working with Ghostly for about a year, but it's more about, okay, we're releasing this record. How should we go about that in the UK that might differ to the US? Do you have any ideas as to, remixes or people they should work with? What single should come first? What press they should do, whether there's a particular PR or a particular agent they should be chatting to or talking to, which all kind of comes under that umbrella of A&R and development, I guess, kind of just trying to take an artist to where they need to be. So yeah, it's kind of a range really from inception of someone who has nothing going on and you're building the entire thing, to kind of just helping someone who already has something going, but maybe they want to get bigger or develop in a certain way or do something that they haven't been able to do to that point, and maybe I can help them get there.
And that's across both with the management and then you get the artists presented to you at Ghostly. Yeah,
I mean, I can sign stuff there, but it's more about, okay, you're in the UK. How can we be doing better in the UK? How can this artist be doing better in the UK? They might be doing really well in the US, but maybe nobody knows them here. And it's like, okay, how can you use your expertise and the experience I have to kind of help them develop? Because, like I said, they're a US label, and it's kind of this is the first time they've had someone on the ground in the UK to kind of develop and work with their artists here.
And so, as a management, you said you work with bands from just a SoundCloud link. How you said sometimes, obviously, you said bigger artists tend to come to you, but you sometimes find them on a SoundCloud link. So, how does that situation arise?
I very briefly ran a record label where it was literally just, a very, very small label where I'd print up 300 records or whatever and put them out. And I guess that's how I found I don't know, most managers I speak to, they kind of fall into it. I don't think it's something that many people set out to do. And that's definitely the case for me. Like I say, I found a couple of artists online and wanted to put out their music, and so did. And then, they were young and they didn't have a clue what they were doing, and kind of neither did I, but it was kind of like, okay, I'll help you in some way, introduce you to people, or just kind of help try and take the weight off you at some point. And then slowly but surely you kind of realize that you're a manager and you're kind of doing that. And then it's like, oh shit, like I guess that's what I'm doing. And then, I always had other jobs at the time. I was working at Sony or whatever. And then eventually you're like, oh, I'm actually making enough money from this to be able to quit that job and maybe just focus on it. So that's kind of how it happened. I would be hesitant to say that like somebody who literally just has one link on a SoundCloud needs a manager. I think I think that happened that way because, like I said, I also wanted to put out the music. I think I would say it's relatively. I would say you need kind of something going on, whether you're playing shows or whether you have some kind of label interest, or whether I would say that you need some kind of business before you get a manager, because 20% of nothing is still nothing. So there's no real point in having me there. Unless there's something for me to do, but yeah, I guess other people might have a different idea about that. If there's something to be said from taking someone from nothing. But yeah, like I say, I've had artists come to me where they're like 3-4 years into their career, and that's kind of just as gratifying. It's just as hard work. It's a case of like, okay, let's take this to the next. It's like I've been doing okay, but how do I take it bigger? How do I get to a different point? How do I break into this part of the industry that I haven't done before?
Great. I want to pick up on the point you said about someone on SoundCloud not necessarily needing a label with Lenny in a minute, but I want to know how the general experience you're describing compares with yours, Sarah, because obviously you're kind of working with artists and.
I think I think each management company is kind of like different, and sometimes it's not a company; it's just one manager also, and. I think definitely what's the most important is the relation between the artist and the manager, and the fact that they have the same vision and want the same things. So that can be being into like the same music, which is how you just go into finding something you really really like and want to push it, or on the other side, just kind of becoming friend with an artist first, and then just the bond happens, and then we just how can we get to the next level together? With the artists that we work, all the artists that we work with were already kind of some were friends, and then we grew together, and some were already established. And there was a couple of artists that we worked with, and then just realized actually you don't need management. And now they carrying on their career and doing really well, but without management. So yeah, I'm definitely think that not everyone needs a manager. The manager is, first of all, the artist needs to have a clear idea of what they want. The manager can't decide that for them. And I think the manager is just here to amplify something that is already happening by creating contacts and stuff. And also, when it gets to a level of where the artist is either spending too much time in the studio or touring, etc., taking off everything else that comes with it to leave more space to creativity, so the artist can focus on playing, creating, and all the creative side, and the manager can do the more boring side like finances and contracts and legal and stuff. But yeah, I do think that the manager is here to create a strategy for the artist and link him to the right people to get along with it and reach their goal. Yeah.
So I think it's important to think about the idea that management providing that strategy and in that guidance in terms of contacts. But we want to talk about the early steps as well. So again, Lenny, we were talking, about the point in which you need management, and you talked about doing it for yourself and what you can do. So where do you see where do you fit in terms of what opportunities are there for new artists to kind of get themselves out there?
I mean, to touch a little bit on the kind of management side of stuff, and the idea of having a manager so that it takes off the weight of the stresses of the boring side of the industry, if you like, the databases, the finances, all that kind of stuff. Part of the thing that we built with Kicker is to, I guess, alleviate some of that pressure. For example, like we automate publishing claims. So that side of being a DIY artist is so much easier. So there is, I'm not going to say less of a call for management, because it's now much bigger. I don't know how to word this. I want to say DIY artists don't necessarily need management in the lower stages and the earliest stages of their career, because there are so many tools out there to do those tasks for them. I think that's what I want to say.
Yeah. And I think that correlates with what you Patrick and Sarah were saying as well. What opportunities do you see for artists to get themselves to a stage where they are achieving a certain amount of what they want to do without the need to be looking for additional support?
I think just as a rule, I think people shouldn't be looking for a manager. I think if they try and do everything, start themselves and really put themselves into it and get the word out and do everything to push themselves, then normally the manager will naturally come to them. And that's how you said, if you like, you will find it, because something is already going on. So I don't think an artist should stay in their room and to say, oh, well, I don't have a manager, so I can't make it.
That should be, if anything, a kick up the backside kind of thing of, I want a manager. So instead of sitting here and waiting for a manager, you need to get out there and do more so that people start taking notice, rather than just being, oh, I'm going to email these people and see if they want to manage me. And if not, I guess I'm going to sit here because no one wants to manage me. Now you need to be going out and doing more cool stuff, getting bigger and better shows, whatever, just to try and, I guess, make people notice you rather than trying to get in their email inboxes, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there's a few sides to that. I mean, I think I definitely, over the course of the next 20 minutes, bring in things around money and royalties, and I think there's an aspect of that. And you and Patrick have both mentioned publishing and sync, which certain people in the audience might not necessarily appreciate. But I want to focus on the idea of building an audience first and bring in James now. So, I mean, we had a little discussion backstage. Obviously, James has mentioned the high-profile artists he's worked with, but again, what tools do you think are available for emerging artists to do stuff for themselves and not have to employ you?
No, it's a fair point. I mean, we've kind of really toyed around with that balance ourselves over the years since we've been going. At what point do you get value back from employing digital marketing, investing that much money in certain stages of your career? And I think now more than ever, there's so many resources online. If you've got the kind of drive to go out there and learn about the industry and market yourself, you don't need thousands of pounds to kind of make videos anymore. It's as simple as that. You've got a phone. And the creativity that I've seen from people in the early stages of their career is, it mirrors the creativity of their music if they're good. A lot of the time, and you find that a lot of truly creative artists, it's not just limited to their music. They have a vision about how that's visually represented. It's everything else, and I don't think it's about big budgets. I think where we come in is when people have busy tour schedules. They're releasing a lot, maybe on labels who have pretty shit marketing teams, to be honest, and don't do anything around it. So it just goes in the system and out, unless you have people like us shouting and kind of making stuff happen. So yeah, there's still definitely a massive place for us, and I think it's about trying to just use the online resources that are there and learn, educate yourself. You can put stuff up on YouTube, and I think the whole kind of the MySpace hero dream of the early 2000s or whatever of making it by just putting your music up and being discovered. There's normally a little bit more to it than that, but you can certainly get a good start to things and get a bit of momentum and get something about you, as was mentioned earlier, and put yourself out there. That's how you get the gigs. That's how you kind of get the ball moving. And I think it's the same with digital. You build an audience from ultimately capitalizing on these opportunities that you create for yourself through genuine conversation and being yourself.
Yeah, how does that correlate with the artists you work with, Patrick?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you need to. I think as everyone I think has touched on, it's a manager isn't going to kind of make anything happen for you in the first instance. Like, you need to be doing stuff, you need to be out there, and there is. I mean, even in the kind of 6 years that I've been a manager, it's changed so dramatically. In terms of like, you would get with an artist, you would sign a label deal, you would sign a publishing deal, you would get an agent, you would go out and play live, and that was kind of it. But now, there is so much more available in terms of these digital service providers, AWOL and Ditto and Believe and all these kind of things, where you can take so much more ownership back. And that's not to say that doing record deals or publishing deals is a bad thing. It works for certain artists, and it works for definitely works for a lot of mine. But it's that thing of like, an artist should educate themselves and work out like these things that are available, because there is so many tools available now, and there is money available from the PRS and from the Arts Council and whatever, and there's all these kind of things available that can get you out there and working, and it's like I say, I think every like a manager really would you need to have, I think Sarah touched on it, like the artist needs to have a very clear plan of what they want, otherwise the manager can't help you at all.
Yeah, and I want to bring this back to some other things in a minute. I know I say that after every topic, because I think there's some interesting things there about kind of creating new music. But I believe, Sarah, within your organisation, you work with more DJs. So does the same thing apply for DJs building a profile online?
I mean, online, just the content is key as well, I guess. So if your content is not music, we work with a couple of DJs like Jack Master, which is doing pretty good for himself, but doesn't actually produce at all. So just have to like find other ways to create content, and that can be mixes, radio shows, videos. I don't know, just like real good like social media content, and like press. You just have to like find other ways to just create a story about what's happening. That is not creating music, really. Yeah, and I think this is both online and in person as well. I think it's really important for people to not just focus online, but also focus on being part of a community, being like going out to the clubs. Like if you want to get booked somewhere, go and hang out with these people, go and things. So it's it's just 360-degree thing, really.
I think that's really important. I think anything that you see online, you should also be replicating in person. So I'm going to pull it back to that point now. And one of the reasons I keep trying to make that distinction between music that you create yourselves and not, and we've seen a few things, words and acronyms banded around like PRS. How many people in the room are aware of what PRS is? So some, but not all. So I'll just break that down. So when you are an artist, you and release music or perform music live, there are two main sources of income. One is for one you get for the recording of the music, and one you get for the composition of the music. So when you upload your music, for example, to Spotify, you get royalties for, and you own that record. You get most of the conversations we hear about royalties we get are from the fact that you potentially own the recording, or the record label owns the recording. When you get played on radio, you tend to get what we call publishing, and that is the royalties that are associated with the composition. That's very broad. That's the 1 minute version of that conversation. There are loads more royalties, but that's the quick version. But what it does mean is that, we mentioned before, unlocking that money as a source of income to help you do more. And it's important to know which is which. So if you're playing your own music live, or your own music that you've written, I should say, is played on the radio, that unlocks a source of income for you. If the recordings that you own are played on Spotify or selling it on iTunes, then that unlocks royalties that way as well. An extension of that is the broader world of publishing, which is linked to compositions. And Patrick, you mentioned before having worked with syncs and everything as well. It seems to me that syncs are a really, over the last 5 to 10 years, have become more there's more opportunity for new artists to get involved with syncs. You look like you may disagree with me.
No, I do. I think it's...
Sorry, but first, can you explain what syncs are for everyone?
Yeah, so synchronization is, the synchronization of music to a piece of moving image, so film, TV, adverts, etc. You are right. I think that there is this kind of somewhat of an opinion that sync can somehow like save you and you're going to do really well on sync, and now everyone is so active in that market, and they want, like when I was working at Sony, the pressure on us as a sync department was so heavy to get someone to sync, and it's like, it doesn't work like that. Like I don't really like when people say like this piece of music is syncable. It's like that doesn't really exist. Obviously there's certain artists that do better than others at it, but yes, I mean, I have an artist that literally makes, he has one copyright that basically makes so much money every year that it allows him to live and allows him to be an artist and allows him to make records and put out. And that's total luck. We didn't expect that to happen. It just happened.
Sorry, and when you say copyright, you mean a song that he's a piece of music that
he made a
written.
track. It got used on a couple of things, and because it's a very original sounding track, and there's not that much that sound like it. It just keeps getting used over and over again, and but like I said, you couldn't plan for that. It was total luck that happened, and as it is, it's sustained his career, but and allowed him to take longer making records, or allowed him to tour less, or whatever. But yeah, sync is obviously very important. It's a great way of making money. But yeah, I would just be careful that it's not like the saving. Like you're not just going to put a track out and it's going to go up on TV or whatever. And you've also got to understand that, maybe it's a bit too long to go into, but here in the UK we have a thing called a blanket license. So like if your music gets used on the BBC or on TV, you're not really, you don't get to approve that usage. It just happens through the PRS and you get paid some money, but you don't get paid anywhere near as much as you would in the US.
So actually, I just realised I didn't really explain what the PRS is when I was explaining about publishing. So PRS is the organisation that blanket license music for play on radio, and as Patrick says, on the BBC. And while I think, you're absolutely right in that sync, some people think getting a sync is the thing that's going to make or break you. I think the interesting thing now, certainly when I was sort of a performing artist 10 years ago, is that there is real potential there. It is to get smaller syncs and make some income is something you can look at.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely happens. I remember when I was at Sony, like George Ezra is a perfect example of an artist who really was kind of going nowhere, and then it was kind of not doing very well, and he got that Sync Budapest on the BBC, and suddenly his record sold 1 million copies. Like, it does happen, but you can't be like, oh, that's definitely going to be the way it happens.
I think this is definitely more and more happening with content, like recent things like Netflix and Amazon Prime, etc., that have content that is so regular, and they create content all the time, and they want to be really relevant to everyday's culture. So I think that the Netflix series or little adverts, or like online adverts, or everything that is just really wants to be relevant to today's culture, are more likely to go and search for, I don't know, the headline of today's festival's music, rather than going to the Ed Sheeran, etc.
I think that's a really good point. Like, yeah, Netflix, because these companies are making so much content, they do want to be more relevant. The flip side of that is that they don't pay as much money, but they are, we've had some great syncs on Netflix that have really helped our artists, push them into that world. And they have kind of been a really positive force, I think, in that, because they're just making so much content that they constantly need music, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to go through so much in a short space of time with this, and I think it's just important to kind of make you guys aware of all the different options that I think there are for new music creators and aspiring artists and DJs now. So if you do want to find out more about syncs, then there is plenty of resources online. Just want to go back to Lenny for a minute and talk more broadly around royalties, because you've mentioned before, so far about how your Kicker, the platform, allows you to track things and track data and see where that money comes in from. Like, how do you see that work, and how do you see that empowering new artists?
I mean, to take it back to I guess kind of the reason why we put the tools that we did into the platform is because there's a bit of a divide with the information that a record label might receive to the information that record label then gives to the artist himself. Granted, if you are working with a record label, you might not necessarily need to be exploiting that information because the record label will be doing that for you. But there are certain things like even just demographics and that kind of stuff of the audience that is listening to your music You can use a website like artists.spotify.com to get that to get those analytics for Spotify. But if you want those analytics from almost any other platform, you can't. You can't have them. Record labels do get that information, so we kind of implemented those exact analytics into Kicker so that an artist can take that information and I hate using the word exploit, but exploit that information for social media marketing or whatever. You get to know your audience.
Or planning your own tour dates early on as well. I mean, ultimately, you're not going to get taken on by a booking agent or a manager for that matter if you've not been proactive to show that you can kind of target markets you're strong in.
100%. And if, let's say, you've got 10,000 listens on one song on Spotify, if you don't know where they're coming from, cool, you've got 10,000 listens on Spotify. What if you found out that all those 10,000 are in Denmark? You need a Denmark tour. Yeah, that kind of empowerment.
But then that's that
have.
spark, isn't it, that we were talking about earlier? You need that something, and that something where people all of a sudden are interested.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, I don't know, like without that information, you would just be oblivious. You'd just be like, oh, I'm doing all right. I'm on a thing. But it's like, oh no, there's actually an opportunity here.
I think, like with all of the other insights that are available to kind of up-and-coming artists as well on the other social media platforms, YouTube channels, all this other kind of stuff, you can put a pretty strong case together and actually learn about this audience that you're finding out yourself. Who is it? Where are they? And kind of start kind of acting accordingly, I guess.
So how do you get involved in those campaigns, James? Like, how have you seen that work successfully?
So I mean, we work on slightly bigger scale of that. The majors obviously sign tracks that do really well in certain territories, and then they want to see if they can turn that into a global hit. They sometimes bring us on to kind of try and help kind of build a more international storyline around the artist, help them kind of become more accessible, I guess, outside of whatever country it is that they're really big in, whether it's Germany, Albania, I mean, we've worked with some quite random stuff like that. They're just like huge superstars in these, in one country, and just trying to kind of like make that more appealing. So all of that's a lot of that. We use demographic data for that to see how we're growing in those other territories. Then, how successful are we being targeting them? But on an emerging level, when we've been working with people like bands that have done a tour of the UK, a 10-city tour, you can actually start seeing from those tours, a support tour maybe, how many people have actually come and found you. Have you been successful in converting anyone? Maybe you should have done more when you're on the road there to kind of create more noise. And you can actually correlate then the cities that you're growing in and hopefully the tour that you've just bust your balls getting around the country on.
Great stuff. I'm kind of aware we're sort of steaming through all of this, and I do want to offer the opportunity for anyone who has any questions. So just throw that out there. Yeah. Oh, gentleman at the back. We have no microphone, so shout loudly, please.
I think it's a case by case thing. Every artist has different needs. Some artists are really hands on and want to do everything and don't actually need you to do much. Some other people actually want to do absolutely nothing and don't even have a phone and don't care about what is happening and want you to do everything. So there's a thing I call the 5 pillars of management, which is the life calendar. So doing the strategy where you should play, where you shouldn't play, and the logistics, how to get the DJs there. The finances, collecting the money for you, whether it's royalties or doing their taxes. The legal, which is doing the contracts, and the deals, publishing deals and stuff like that, the marketing and the PR, press, social media, blah, blah, and the music. So A&Ring, like sitting with them in the studio and being like, okay, so if you want to, your goal is to release on these labels, maybe you should take off that drum or like do this. So there's really a bit of everything, but some people don't want you to touch to their music, and some people don't want you to touch to their social media. So I think it's a discussion to be had with each artist and manager, and kind of decide where the line is and how much they want to give you, and that will also translate to how much you're getting from them in terms of money and percentage at the end. So just like if you can have a 10% deal and really just do the contracts and the strategy, or you can have a 20% deal and do way more. I really think it's a case by case thing.
Anyone else? Patrick, do you want to?
Yeah, I think basically covered it. I mean, I think really it comes down to the artist. Like we said at the start, like the artist needs to give me tasks to do. You know, it's like obviously I haven't, like, those 5 things are the main things that you would do. But if an artist wants to, you know, go off and write a record for a year and not do anything else, then, you know, it really depends artist to artist. The artist should be pushing you too. You know, you should be constantly in dialogue with the artist about, right, what do we want to do? A in the short term and B in the long term, and how do we get there and how do we do it?
Does that help? Okay. Yeah, another question there. So you're mainly talking about sending tracks in various forms and finished processes to the industry, not so much for release. Is that right? Yeah. So yeah, what state do you expect to hear tracks in? Is that?
Well, we sometimes get sent albums unmastered to see whether or not we want to work an album campaign, for instance. But I think normally that would be the artist would probably already have other material out there to listen to, so you could kind of get an idea of where it's at and where it'll be. I mean, we used to do a lot of kind of blogger outreach when we first started, which was like getting premieres with media partners and stuff like that. And yeah, I think personally, it's all about sending something that's, if you don't already have a relationship there, you want to give the best impression of yourself. That's my opinion, but I don't know if these guys have a different opinion.
For me, I think it's a case of a good song's a good song, whether it's a demo or it's a finished product. I think the big problem, to make a bit of a differentiation there, is that it's harder to see your end goal if you send in a demo. Because it's like, you know that, oh no, this drum track's it's nowhere near good enough. That'll be better. We'll get that done in the studio and it'll be all cool. And this bass line's going to be way better than this, but I just don't have. What, you know, like, and you're going to have this end goal in mind that's going to be this amazing track, and you see that in the demo. Other people don't see that in the demo. They see the demo, so you might have a really cool track. And I mean, you may disagree, but I'd say if you can wait a few months and get that physical final product done, that is going to yield you better results, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely about it's a quality control thing more than anything. I think that actually needs to extend through everything that you do.
Sarah, how does that sound for you?
I agree with what's been said, and also I think having more than one track can be useful. We've had artists come with 10 tracks and say, okay, these are the ones I want to release in the next 3 years. So that definitely gives us like a plan, like a long-term plan of, okay, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this. Maybe this one we take it out. And they were not finished, all of them. Like once, then he has to work more on it and get us a pre-mastered, to get mastered by the label when it gets signed. So definitely don't wait until it's finish to do something with it.
I think it correlates to a point you made, though, Sarah, about developing relationships, and especially in the real world. It's not often a one thing. You don't send one record off and then you get something immediately back. A lot of the time, yeah, it's about developing a relationship, and then if you're comfortable within a relationship, maybe you can play them sort of unfinished mixes and things like that. But it's because you have it's because you've built a relationship at that point as well. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Patrick?
I mean, I think most people understand that Facebook is dead. In my opinion, I don't give a shit about it. I think, but again, it totally depends on the artist, because I have a female rapper who looks amazing and models and looks, so for her, Instagram, of course. Then I have people that make weird, noodly electronic music, and like they don't need to be on Instagram. There's no point. So it totally depends what you're trying to get across. Like I think Instagram and Twitter, from what I'm told, are more important. Snapchat again is a lot younger apparently. I get you get these analytics from labels and stuff, and how much I believe in them I don't know, but I wouldn't think it's important to have a following to get signed. I think it helps, but I don't think that's be all and end all. But yeah, I think Facebook is tough because what they're doing is they're limiting how you can hit your fan base. So as soon as you hit a number of likes, say you get to 10,000 likes, they're immediately going to start to ask you to pay to hit your own fan base. Your fans won't see your posts anymore, and that's the problem with Facebook at the moment, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Facebook is very much it's how MySpace was when I first started doing this. It was like on its way out, just in terms of people have spent so much money and time investing in one space that quite a few people have been caught short. So it's about finding that balance as well. I think just as an artist or label generally, spread your digital profile out so that you're not relying on one area, because you don't know what the next flavor of the month's going to be. There's the bottom line. Now, I think the real trick is, especially as an artist starting out, is finding that balance where you're not spending all of your time doing that, because ultimately you're still honing your craft. But yeah, you definitely still need to be just trying to build in these other areas. Some of them will work better than others. Some of them will go through phases of popularity. And just try and be interested in it, I guess.
Yeah. One quick thing I'll add before we need to wrap up is a lot of people underestimate building your fan base on Spotify. Getting people to follow you there, because as we say, that you can track that through the analytics, and it also helps with all the playlisting that happens in the background. So if you follow artists, if fans follow you on Spotify, it's more likely to show up in your release radar playlist and things like that.
And also your following in real life, I think it's important not to forget that.
Yeah.
If you're not part of a community, it's really hard to make it in this way. Like, it's so much easier to be part of a crew or of something that everybody's pushing each other, everybody's booking each other on different cities and stuff. That's how you all raise at the same time, basically, rather than just be like one electron.
I think that entire thing with social media is really important. The big thing to think about is likes and follows and all that kind of stuff don't matter as much as interactions do. If you've got 2,000 people following you and all 2,000 of those people are commenting and liking and sharing your stuff, that's way better than having 15,000 followers and 10 likes per post.
As long as it's real.
Yeah. Right. Paying for likes is never going to advance you in any way whatsoever.
I'm getting the evil eye now, but I thought that this was all really, really good stuff, so I really didn't want to cut it off. Just one final thing before I say thanks to our panelists. As I said, as part of the Music Leads program that we're doing, we're trying to do as many events like this, all linked to all different events and different partners. So we've done Live at Leeds. We're doing one with Leeds Jazz Festival in July as well. We're trying to bring music industry experts. Last year we did bring. I know a lot of this about Spotify because we brought Spotify to Leeds last year. I'm going to put a mailing list thing here if you'd like to stay in touch with what we do, so you can find out about more events that are happening in Leeds all the time around this. So, that was it. So next week in Wakefield, on Thursday, the 14th, is that the real day? There is a digital marketing masterclass that you can find out if you go to Generator on Facebook, if you look for that, with the guys who do digital marketing for Run the Jewels and various other really big artists. And then back here in October, there is a big event called Yorkshire Music Forum as well. So there's constantly stuff happening to get advice. Anyway, that's that pitch, but I hope that's useful. Can I have a big round of applause for the panelists?